Every time a cruise ship gets caught in a storm, the comments fill up with the same two claims. The captain should have just checked the forecast, and the stabilizers should have kept the ship level. Both are wrong. The real fight against a hurricane doesn't happen on the bridge, and it doesn't happen during the storm. It happens days earlier, in a room in Miami, and in a hidden city below your feet. Here's the thing most passengers never realize. The ship you're standing on isn't really one ship. It's two. Above the waterline, there's the vacation. Pools, theaters, buffets. But below Deck 2, there's an entire working city that most guests will never see. On many large ships, more than 1,000 crew members live down there, most of them in cabins below the waterline. Connecting it all is a corridor that runs the full length of the vessel, from bow to stern, usually on Deck 0 or Deck 1. The crew calls it the I-95, after the American highway. It links the crew mess, the laundry, the provision stores, the crew cabins, the engine spaces. It's how luggage moves, how food moves, how everything on the ship moves without ever crossing a guest hallway. Pallets of produce roll from the hull side loading doors into temperature-controlled storage. Linens, maintenance gear, and stage props travel the length of the vessel in minutes. The walls are lined with notices, schedules, and rules that the crew reads on the move. And when a hurricane enters the forecast, this hidden city is where the battle begins, because the passengers upstairs will experience the storm as an inconvenience. The people on Deck 0 will experience it as a job. But before a single crew member below deck lifts a finger, the first move happens somewhere else entirely. Not on the ship, not even on the ocean. In an office building in Miami. In 2016, Royal Caribbean did something no cruise line had ever done. It hired its own chief meteorologist, a broadcast weather veteran named James Van Fleet. During hurricane season, he worked from a storm monitoring center at the company's Miami headquarters, in front of a wall of weather displays reportedly 25 feet wide, tracking every ship in the fleet against every system in the Atlantic. Carnival followed, opening its own fleet operations center in 2018, staffed around the clock. During his years in the role, Van Fleet diverted vessels out of the direct paths of Category 5 hurricanes Irma and Maria and ordered the evacuation of the company's private island ahead of Hurricane Dorian. So when commenters say the captain should just check the forecast, they've got the structure backwards. The captain isn't checking a weather app. An entire shoreside operation is checking the ocean for him. Now, before we go below deck, we need to kill the biggest misconception in this entire topic, because it shapes how people read every storm video they see. Most people assume that open water is the most dangerous place to be when severe weather is coming. Van Fleet spent years explaining that it's the exact opposite. On land, your home is a fixed target. It cannot move. A ship can. A hotel in the path of a hurricane has no options. A ship in the path of a hurricane has an entire ocean of them. And here's a second twist, and that sounds like marketing until you check it. The seas of the Caribbean, the Gulf, and the Western Atlantic are, on average, calmer during hurricane season than in winter, because the high-pressure systems and humid air of summer tend to settle the water. Winter crossings, the kind that batter ferries in the North Sea, are routinely rougher than a July week in the Bahamas. Hurricane season isn't 6 months of violence with occasional calm. It's 6 months of calm with occasional well-tracked violence. The danger isn't constant, it's specific, it's visible from a week away, and that changes everything about how you fight it. And that shoreside operation has one enormous advantage: time. Most tropical systems show up on forecast models 7 to 10 days before they arrive. That head start matters because of a piece of math that surprises almost everyone. According to NOAA, the average hurricane moves forward at roughly 11 to 12 miles per hour. That's it. The winds inside it are catastrophic, but the storm itself crawls across the map at the pace of a casual cyclist. A modern cruise ship, meanwhile, can run at over 21 knots, and a ship like Odyssey of the Seas tops out around 23.7 knots, according to her own captain. That's roughly 27 miles per hour, more than double the forward speed of the storm chasing it. This is why the standard play isn't to endure a hurricane. It's to simply not be there. The ship reroutes, swaps an Eastern Caribbean itinerary for a Western one, skips a port, adds a sea day, and sails in sunshine while the hurricane churns through empty ocean hundreds of miles away. That's why a cruise scheduled for St. Thomas and St. Martin can quietly become a cruise to Jamaica, Grand Cayman, and Cozumel. Passengers grumble about the missed port, collect some onboard credit, and never realize they've just watched the entire system work perfectly. Okay, but sometimes the margin gets thin. Sometimes the ship can't avoid rough weather entirely, only the worst of it. And that's the moment the hidden city goes to work, hours before the first big wave, while the passengers upstairs are still ordering cocktails. The order that comes down is one of the oldest in seafaring: secure for sea. On the vehicle of a heavy weather checklist, it sounds bureaucratic. In practice, it means hundreds of people fanning out across the lower decks to tie down an entire floating town. Deck crews lash mooring ropes, drums, and equipment. Exterior doors are sealed. Watertight doors in the machinery spaces are closed. Open deck access is restricted, and on many vessels the elevators are switched off because a hard roll can trip an elevator and trap someone inside it. Every loose object below deck, in the storerooms, the paint locker, the bosun's store, gets stowed and lashed. The ship's medical center gets its own preparation. The hospital is secured, and seasickness medication and first aid supplies are moved somewhere immediately reachable, because once the rolling starts, getting into a storeroom becomes a two-person job. It is a full inventory of everything on board that can move, conducted against a deadline set by the sky. And while all of that is happening, the officers are quietly rearranging the ship's weight. This is the invisible part of storm preparation. Ballast water can be shifted between tanks to adjust how the ship sits in the water and how sharply she rolls. But there's a catch that naval architects lose sleep over, called the free surface effect. A tank that's completely full or completely empty is stable. A tank that's half full contains tons of water that can slosh from one side to the other as the ship rolls, and that moving mass amplifies the very motion you're trying to fight. So before heavy weather, the crew reviews every slack tank on board, and stability calculations are run to make sure the ship's motion stays within safe limits for the seas ahead. Passengers never feel this decision being made. They only feel its absence when it's made badly. Nowhere is that more intense than in the galley. A big ship's kitchens run almost continuously, and they are full of exactly the things you don't want airborne: knives, boiling stock, stacked porcelain, glass. So the galley has its own storm ritual. Crockery, cutlery, bottles, and glasses get secured. Floors are scrubbed clean of oil and food spills that could send a cook sliding. In the dining rooms, safety hooks under the chairs are attached. Raised barriers called fiddles go up around table edges, and damp tablecloths are laid down because wet cloth grips plates that dry cloth lets slide. Menus quietly simplify. There's a reason Navy veterans who rode out typhoons remember eating cold cuts. When the deck is moving, open flames and deep fryers become weapons. So hot cooking gets scaled back or stopped. That room service order passengers joke about in the comments. Whether it arrives at all is a below-deck risk calculation made by people carrying trays through corridors that are actively trying to throw them off their feet. 2 decks further down, the engine department is running its own playbook. Rough weather is a mechanical stress test. As the bow rises and falls, the propellers can lift partially out of the water, and every time that happens, the load on the engines fluctuates wildly. Sump levels in the machinery start reading falsely as oil sloshes with the roll, which can trigger alarms and even trip a running machine at exactly the moment you can least afford it. So engineers watch those levels like hawks. Ships that normally run their engine room unattended overnight fully man it instead, and engines may be switched into maneuvering mode so they can answer the bridge instantly. The steering system gets special attention. The ship switches from autopilot to hand steering to stop the rudder from hunting back and forth. And if only one steering motor is running, the second one is switched on so both work together for maximum torque against the sea. A standby generator is put on load because in a storm you do not want to be one electrical failure away from losing power. Tank levels are managed so pumps never lose suction mid-roll, and every spare part in the engine room gets lashed down like cargo. None of this is visible from the buffet. All of it is why the lights stay on. And then there's the piece of equipment everyone has heard of and almost everyone misunderstands: The stabilizers. Here's what they actually are. Below the waterline, on both sides of the hull, sit retractable fins that extend outward like aircraft wings. Sensors measure the ship's roll angle and speed. A controller runs the numbers, and hydraulics tilt the fins in real time to generate lift against the roll. Done well, active fins can cut rolling by up to 90%. The Queen Mary II, built specifically for rough Atlantic crossings, carries 4 of them, each weighing around 70 tons and extending more than 6 meters from the hull. When they are not needed, the fins fold back into pockets in the hull, partly to save fuel and partly so the ship can squeeze into ports in narrow channels. On some bridges, officers keep visible reminders of whether the fins are out or in, because forgetting is expensive. But now the fine print, and this is the part the comment sections get wrong. Stabilizers reduce roll, the side-to-side motion. They do very little against pitch, the bow rising and plunging. And fin stabilizers need forward speed to work. Slow the ship down enough, and they lose their grip on the water. They make a storm survivable and even comfortable. They do not make it disappear. So what happens when the whole system, the meteorologists, the escape speed, the preparation, isn't enough? For that, we need to go to the night the modern cruise industry still studies. On February 6, 2016, Anthem of the Seas, then one of the newest and largest ships afloat, left Bayonne, New Jersey for Florida with 4,529 passengers and 1,616 crew on board. The forecast showed a strong storm developing off the Carolinas. The National Weather Service's Ocean Prediction Center had issued warnings, and the captain believed he could get around the system. He couldn't. The storm intensified far beyond the official forecast. By the following afternoon, Anthem sailed into a low-pressure system that behaved, in the words of nearly everyone on board, like a hurricane. What happened next is documented almost minute by minute in the official Bahamas Maritime Authority investigation, and the below-deck timeline reads like a thriller. At 4:32 in the afternoon, the bridge logged winds above 100 knots. 5 minutes later, the reading touched 145 knots, roughly 165 miles per hour, and the ship heeled to 15 degrees. Passengers, confined to their staterooms as furniture overturned and part of a suspended ceiling collapsed, swore the ship was tilting 45 degrees. The U.S. Coast Guard later put the maximum at 18, which on a 348-meter vessel is still enough to send water from a faucet hitting the wall instead of the drain. By 4:41, all 4 bow thrusters, machinery designed for delicately parking the ship in harbor, were pressed into service just to hold her nose into the wind, while failure alarms sounded continuously on the steering system. At 6:26 that evening, water was coming in at the Deck 5 sliding doors. The master assessed the waves at up to 15 meters, and down below, the machinery was fighting for its life. The 2 Azipod propulsion units dropped out and came back, and shortly before 8 that night, neither of them was responding to orders at all. The engineering team advised the bridge to avoid turning. For 8 to 10 hours, they kept a wounded ship pointed into a storm no forecast had fully predicted, with lifeboats on both sides taking damage above their heads. Anthem made it. 4 minor injuries out of more than 6,000 people on board. But here's the part that never trends: what the storm left behind below deck. Coast Guard inspectors found the damage was more than superficial. Burned out clutches in the propulsion system had to be replaced before the ship was cleared to sail again, and every passenger got a full refund plus half off a future cruise. And Anthem isn't unique. When Carnival Sunshine hit a violent storm off Charleston in May 2023, with winds of 70 to 90 miles per hour, and passengers reporting 40-foot seas, water-flooded interior corridors, and some of the cabins taken out of service by water damage were crew cabins, the ones lowest in the ship. The people who spend the storm securing your dinner plates then spend the days after it hauling soaked mattresses out of their own bedrooms. Because heavy weather doesn't end when the sea flattens. The recovery playbook is its own checklist: a thorough inspection of the vessel for damage, temporary lashings removed one by one, every weather-related incident documented, and, crucially, rest, because maritime safety guidance treats crew fatigue after a storm as a genuine hazard in itself. A crew that spent 10 hours being thrown against bulkheads is a crew that makes mistakes the next morning. There's one more number from that Carnival Sunshine Storm worth sitting with. A passenger who'd worked in emergency services put it bluntly. With winds over 40 knots, nobody was coming to rescue them. That is the quiet truth underneath everything you've just heard. In a hurricane at sea, there is no outside help on the way. The ship is the rescue, which is why the industry pours money into weather centers in Miami, why ships burn extra fuel to stay hundreds of miles from a storm center, and why the securing routine below deck is drilled until it's muscle memory. Every layer exists because the final layer, riding it out, is the one nobody ever wants to test. And the Bahamas Maritime Authority's conclusion after Anthem said exactly that. The answer wasn't a tougher ship. It was better forecasting, better routing, better sensors. In other words, win the battle earlier. So let's bring it all together. What actually happens below deck when a hurricane hits a cruise ship? The honest answer is that if everything works, the hurricane never hits at all. A meteorologist ashore sees it a week out. The ship, twice as fast as the storm, quietly steps aside. And on the rare day the margin collapses, a hidden city on deck 0 lashes down the galley, doubles up the steering motors, extends its underwater wings, and holds the line for as long as it takes. The passengers remember a rough night. The crew remembers a shift. And the next time you're on a ship and the captain announces a course change for weather, you'll know what that one sentence is hiding. A decision made days ago by people you'll never meet, in rooms you'll never see, so that the most dangerous thing that happens on your vacation is a closed pool deck.